The wealthy man's child had never taken a step until the moment his father discovered the caretaker in an extraordinary situation. Life presents us with moments when we feel everything is within our reach, when we believe that through sufficient effort and determination, we can achieve every aspiration. These were the formative years of Destiny Williams, a young African-American woman from Brooklyn's tough neighborhoods, who firmly believed that hard work could transform her family's destiny. Destiny envisioned the day she would complete her education, secure steady employment, purchase her mother a modest home, and ensure her younger brother's college education. Each sunrise witnessed her running through narrow streets, gazing at the gray sky framed by weathered brownstones, silently pledging never to surrender. She collected discarded publications from train stations and participated in complimentary sessions at the local church. Every minor achievement served as building blocks for a promising tomorrow. However, destiny rarely follows a direct path. During one harsh winter evening, everything crumbled. Destiny's father, her greatest inspiration, experienced a devastating stroke, abandoning her mother, and brother to survive independently. A household that barely managed financially descended into overwhelming debt. Hospital expenses for her mother, educational costs for her brother, and overdue bills accumulated like towering peaks. Destiny stored away her academic materials and plunged entirely into survival mode. She accepted positions at quick-service restaurants, maintained homes for wealthy households, served customers at upscale establishments, and even cleaned stairways in deteriorating buildings, whatever brought income. Her hands became rough and damaged from cleaning solutions. Her delicate shoulders bent under the burden of overnight work. Nevertheless, she endured everything without protest, understanding each earned dollar sustained her mother and brother. As life's demands intensified, Destiny felt caught in an endless spiral. Evening after evening, she positioned herself beside the small window of her confined apartment, observing the solitary stars above the metropolis, seeking any glimpse of optimism. Her youthful aspirations, once brilliant enough to illuminate. Her spirit now lay crushed beneath responsibility, financial hardship, and anxiety. Then, during one cold, late autumn day, precisely when she believed her hope had diminished, opportunity emerged from the most surprising source. Mrs. Ruth, the elderly neighbor Destiny occasionally assisted, appeared at her entrance. "Destiny, sweetheart," she expressed, "I'm aware of a prosperous household on the Upper West Side seeking a resident caretaker and childminder. They offer excellent compensation, though their child presents unique challenges. His mother died last year, and he hasn't communicated or moved since. If you require employment, I can recommend you." Destiny paused. She never envisioned herself serving the affluent, particularly while carrying her family's burdens. However, rent was overdue, her mother remained unwell, and her brother's prospects remained uncertain. Without alternatives, she agreed, her heart racing with undefined apprehension. Still, she offered Mrs. Ruth a thankful smile. The following morning, Destiny wore her worn jacket, packed a prepared meal into her faded bag, and boarded the northbound train. The car swayed with weary passengers, each absorbed in their personal struggles. Destiny rested her head against the glass, watching graffiti-covered neighborhoods transform into gleaming towers, business professionals, and lines of polished vehicles. Upon reaching the Upper West Side pavement, it resembled another universe. Wide, immaculate walkways bordered with amber-leafed trees, specialty shops where one garment exceeded a month's household expenses. Before her stood a luxurious residential building featuring uniformed doormen and a lobby so pristine it sparkled. Destiny strengthened her hold on her bag's handle, inhaled deeply, and whispered, "For my mother, for my brother, I must remain strong." Her footsteps resonated gently on the marble hallway as she approached an impressive wooden door decorated with complex designs. the gateway to the penthouse that would, in unimaginable ways, transform Destiny Williams's existence permanently. The massive wooden entrance opened, and a cool breeze followed Destiny's entry, bringing with it the uncertain promise of a morning filled with change. She crossed the doorway, her heart pounding, not merely from nervousness, but from the sharp realization of how insignificant and misplaced she felt in this foreign environment. The polished marble flooring mirrored the brilliance of the crystal. Light fixtures suspended from the towering ceiling, each step echoing like a musical note in an elaborate symphony. Glancing upward, she discovered herself in a magnificent entrance hall so flawlessly organized it seemed unreal. Artwork displayed in exact balance. A luxurious dark gray velvet pathway extended before an electronic hearth that flickered softly. In one corner, and sculpted white flowers stood in spotless containers, each bloom perfect. Beside a sweeping curved stairway sat a vintage grand piano, its polished surface gleaming like crystal, a quiet testament that here Destiny might resemble a grain of sand. This Upper West Side sanctuary, previously only observed through magazine, pages or on her damaged phone display, now revealed itself in vivid reality. Expensive automobiles passing beyond the arched windows, premium boutiques across the avenue, and well-dressed shoppers entering and exiting with calm assurance. Destiny tightened her grip on her bag's strap, palm moist with perspiration. Momentarily, she glimpsed her reflection in a nearby mirror. A slender black girl wearing a threadbare jacket, hair secured in a hasty bundle, a single brush stroke within this masterpiece of extravagance. In that moment, she felt not simply that she didn't belong, but a basic fear of the unwritten regulations, embedded in every surface and breath of this residence. If I damage one of those containers, I'll owe more than 3 months' rent, she thought, her throat becoming parched. Before her anxiety could escalate further, a soothing, kind voice emerged from the corridor. "You must be Destiny, correct?" It belonged to Mrs. Lorraine Blake, a short-haired, silver-haired woman whose determined gray-blue eyes conveyed both wisdom and command. Dressed in subtle refinement and holding a leather-bound volume, she moved with the confident grace of someone accustomed to managing every aspect of her existence. However, her smile toward Destiny felt gentler than anything else in the house. "Please enter," she said. "I've been anticipating you. Don't worry. Once you adjust, you'll be fine." Just that tone and those eyes calmed some of Destiny's trembling. Yet her steps remained careful as she passed each item, as though afraid to disturb an unspoken reverence. Mrs. Blake guided her through the hallway. "This penthouse was designed by my son, Matthew. He's fixated on perfection. You'll understand shortly." The words fell like a gentle caution. Destiny dared not ask more, but stored them in her memory. When they entered the living space, Destiny was struck by a cold stillness emanating from its slate-gray walls, penetrating each expensive object. The enormous area felt vacant. Everything was so organized that not a trace of genuine living remained. No family photographs, no scattered playthings, no quickly written messages or discarded clothing. Though the chandelier's soft golden light bathed the room like honey, it lacked what every home requires most: warmth. What tightened her chest wasn't merely the wealth beyond her imagination, but the feeling that this place was a velvet mausoleum displaying perfection while concealing every hint of closeness. She could almost hear her own pulse, a hollow rhythm in the cavernous area. "Don't mind Matthew if he appears distant," Mrs. Blake whispered, gesturing toward a leather chair by the window. "He's endured significant loss, but I believe eventually he'll discover what truly matters beyond perfection." Destiny nodded, feeling both slight relief and growing concern about the actual master of this realm. He wasn't merely a powerful, successful man. He was a spirit encased in ice by his suffering. One glance or sharp word could diminish another person to nothing. In the shadows near the stairway, Matthew Blake stood quietly, watching through reflective pane. He was tall, wearing a perfectly fitted gray suit, ash-brown hair smoothed back, lips formed into a rigid line. His presence alone commanded authority. No words required. The room seemed to pause around him. He observed Destiny with a combination of distrust and haughty expectation, as though ready to attack any error. Yet behind those cold eyes lay profound weariness, a wound no one had healed. To Matthew, everything in this house, including its employees, was simply part of his control system, nothing more. Just as Destiny felt herself choking between two worlds, the rigid silence of this sanctuary and the shattered dream she carried, another entrance awaited opening. The genuine test was only beginning. The very moment Destiny hadn't yet calmed her breathing in the overwhelming luxury, a figure appeared from the staircase, each step deliberate, determined, quiet, yet somehow causing the entire living room to seem to halt. There stood Matthew Blake, tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, his light brown hair smoothed back, every aspect of his face as precisely carved as marble. Everything about him radiated complete control, from how he placed his hand in his pocket, to the icy glance he cast over Destiny, to the barely noticeable tightening of his lips, all creating an invisible boundary she dared not cross. However, the most disturbing aspect of Matthew was his eyes. Steel gray blue, brilliant, yet edged with thorns. His stare was like a sharp blade. It swept over her and left a cold wound beneath the surface. Behind that attractive exterior lay injuries no one had addressed. Whenever those eyes focused on Destiny, she sensed contempt, suspicion, and a warning, like a stain on this spotlessly clean home. Mrs. Lorraine smiled and introduced her, but Matthew simply nodded slightly. No courteous smile, no handshake. He didn't ask Destiny one question, only evaluated her from head to toe, judging her suitability for this pristine space. If Mother selected you, it must be acceptable, he said evenly, almost without emotion. Just ensure you don't create complications. Each word from Matthew sounded like both a greeting and a hidden threat to her presence here. Destiny straightened her shoulders, refusing to look away. She met Matthew's eyes for one steady moment, enough to see not only his coldness, but the deep wound beneath. Someone once loved too intensely, now using power and regulations to protect his own pain. She offered a small, composed greeting. "Hello, Mr. Blake. I'm Destiny. I'll do my utmost." Matthew didn't respond. He turned back to his mother to ask curtly about schedules and safety protocols, then vanished down the hallway into his office. The door closed with a sharp click that echoed through the room, an unbreakable wall. The atmosphere felt heavier afterward. Destiny understood. To Matthew, she was merely a replacement caretaker, valuable only for maintaining order and cleanliness here. He didn't trust her, didn't care where she originated or what dreams and sorrows she carried. To him, Destiny was an object that could be discarded the moment she annoyed him. A mixture of anger and hurt rose in Destiny's chest. She remembered her father's words. No matter how others perceive you, walk with confidence. No one can steal your worth unless you allow them. She vowed not to shed a tear, not to let herself be diminished, even in this frozen mansion. Yet Destiny's very presence, the stark contrast of a young black woman from Brooklyn and Matthew's world, quietly disturbed the long dormant waters here. Every time she moved about, cleaned, cooked, or simply shared a gentle word with Mrs. Lorraine, Matthew sensed a strange imbalance, as if a single stroke of color had disrupted his meticulously controlled grayscale canvas. He was irritated but couldn't stop observing her. Her steady patience and hopeful eyes became both his suspicion and his confusion. How could someone like Destiny dare to enter his realm, where he was accustomed to establishing boundaries and pushing everyone away, especially anyone perceptive, enough to see that beneath his proud mask lay a fragile, wounded soul. From that moment, a silent conflict began. Destiny's courageous struggle to survive for her family versus Matthew's cold, ruthless defenses, born of fear of loss. No one could know then that this seemingly routine introduction would ignite the upheaval that would transform both their lives forever. The heavy entrance to Samuel's room opened slowly, extending the weight of Destiny's encounter with Matthew into a new space. Though here there was no aura of power, only a bone-chilling silence. Destiny entered, hand trembling slightly, eyes taking in the pastel-colored room, every item arranged as neatly and artistically as in an expensive magazine. Layout. The spacious room filled with natural light streaming through a wide window overlooking the park. Sheer white curtains drifted in the gentle breeze. Along one wall, shelves contained dozens of stuffed animals, toy car models, and building blocks, pristine, untouched by any real childhood disorder. In one corner stood a low bookshelf stacked, with fairy tales in English and French. Beside it, a watercolor easel and a complete box of crayons remained ready. Yet in this playroom full of toys, not a single childhood sound floated through the air. No laughter, no running footsteps, not even the faint rustle of crumpled paper. The atmosphere was thick, cold, and suspended, as though time itself had stopped around the loneliness dwelling in every shadow. On the pale gray shag carpet by the window, 4-year-old Samuel sat curled up. Fine blonde hair disheveled, pale skin contrasting sharply with the oversized navy sweater covering his small frame. His deep gray eyes stared out the glass as if pursuing something distant. In his arms he clutched a worn bunny plush whose ears were threadbare, his sole connection to reality. Destiny froze at the threshold, her heart constricting at the sight. Instantly, she sensed the child's isolation, his unspoken pain, and the invisible fear he carried. Motionless, unblinking, he seemed terrified, his spirit emptied by an ordeal no child should endure. Mrs. Lorraine approached quietly and placed a gentle hand on Destiny's shoulder. Her voice was soft and mournful. Since his mother died, he hasn't spoken or walked. Every specialist, doctors, psychologists has been helpless. Samuel has constructed an invisible barrier no one can penetrate. Destiny felt stung by her own childhood memories. Nights her father was absent, her mother up with her illness, the terror of being abandoned with no one to hear her cries. She looked at Samuel and saw behind those vacant eyes a small soul, trapped between a world of luxury and complete solitude. Gently, Destiny knelt beside him, maintaining a respectful distance from his safe zone. She didn't speak. Instead, she placed her bag on the floor, retrieved a worn fairy tale picture book, and began turning its frayed pages. In a low, soothing voice, she recited the stories her mother once told her, letting the words comfort Samuel like a gentle lullaby. He didn't glance her way. His body remained rigid, his grip on the rabbit tightening. Yet Destiny didn't surrender. She stayed for a long while, gaze fixed on Samuel, offering the only warmth she could in this storybook elegant yet ice-cold room. From outside the doorway, Matthew watched in silence. His expression was heavier than usual, filled with both irritation and helpless despair. He observed Destiny and Samuel, two souls from different worlds, each imprisoned by their own invisible barriers, and felt a stirring of discomfort he couldn't identify. The silence stretched on, seemingly unbreakable. But Destiny recognized that this silence wasn't emptiness. It was a suppressed cry for help, a fragile spirit yearning for a patient hand. Deep in her heart, she understood that pain all too well. She too had been a child no one heard, no one asked about, no one reached out to. And in that moment, Destiny vowed quietly to herself that no matter how long it took, she would find a way to bring Samuel back to life, whether through a single blink of connection, a tiny smile, or the softest, most reassuring touch of her hand. From the very moment Destiny stepped out of Samuel's silent room, she knew the real battle was only just beginning, and that her greatest opponent wasn't the loneliness of a frightened child, but the invisible walls built by adults. Walls that Matthew Blake had cemented more firmly than anyone. Each morning before dawn, Destiny rose and moved through the house like a shadow. She polished every walnut surface, dusted each bookshelf, buffed every corner of the cabinets meticulously, rearranged the plush toys, inspected bed linens and curtains, even smoothed the tablecloths until each fold lay perfect. Whenever she heard Matthew's footsteps descending the stairs, the air in the mansion seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if his presence drained warmth from the walls. Matthew never offered a good morning. Instead, he watched her with an evaluating gaze, sometimes as icy as winter wind, sometimes a casual glance that masked razor-sharp scrutiny. A single speck of dust, a stray drop on the kitchen counter, or a spoon left slightly askew could prompt one of his cutting reminders. "How long did you leave that floor cleaner on the wood? The dishes in the dishwasher aren't dry. Check more carefully next time. Samuel's food needs finer cuts. Don't change the menu without permission." Each petty comment accumulated into an invisible weight on Destiny's shoulders, keeping her in a constant state of alertness, never knowing when one misstep might cost her employment. Getting near Samuel proved even more challenging. Whenever Destiny tried to sit beside him, he either retreated further into his own world, or Matthew would reappear unannounced, eyes narrowing in suspicion and frustration he didn't even recognize in himself. At times, if she lingered too long telling a story or sang him a lullaby too softly, Matthew would step in with a sharp frown. "Leave him alone. Don't complicate things. Let the doctors handle it." Matthew's need to control extended far beyond the kitchen, cleaning, or Samuel's daily routine. He'd patrol the house, checking every cupboard and trash bin, demanding to know why she chose one brand of soap over another. Not a day passed without Destiny feeling under the microscope, judged like an outsider clinging to ground that was never hers. Often, exhaustion and humiliation left her on the verge of packing up and leaving in the middle of the night, especially after he'd scolded her for making Samuel cry during a simple story time. The baseless blame stung, and she wondered if she had the strength to endure this harsh world. In those darkest moments, Destiny retreated to the tiny servants' quarters at the end of the hall and called home. Her mother's frail but loving voice would crack through the line. "My daughter, your father's gone, and your brother and I are counting on you. I know it's hard, but our family will survive if you don't give up." And her little brother's determined promise, "Destiny, as long as you stay, I'll study my hardest. Someday we'll have a better life." Those simple words were the spark that kept her burning. She knew that if she could just hold on, if she refused to let Matthew's coldness extinguish her hope, things might yet change. But each day brought new trials. Matthew's aloofness wasn't merely an attitude. It was a fortress built from his own losses and unhealed wounds. Destiny sensed it in every sigh he thought no one heard, in every tight line around his eyes when he believed she wasn't watching. Once she overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice rough as he spoke of Samuel. "No, my son doesn't need friends. Stick to the treatment plan and don't ask about his mother again." That trembling edge in his tone, a mix of anger and helpless fear, revealed the terror beneath his icy veneer, the fear of loss and of failing to protect the one he loved most. Destiny realized then that her presence, a poor black girl from Brooklyn, was the one unpredictable piece in Matthew's carefully ordered world. It made him uneasy, compelled him to scrutinize and test her, hoping she'd quit on her own so he could close his private domain forever. But Destiny, with her quiet resolve, her growing bond with Samuel and her love for the family she'd left behind, chose to stay, to face those stifling days and the relentless coldness of Matthew's gaze, because deep down she believed that even the firmest walls could be broken. The days blurred together in the penthouse like frozen moments. Every movement, every breath, every sound seemed to slow under the weight of the invisible pressure that Destiny felt so keenly. The suffocation came not only from the endless repetitive chores, but from a growing fear in her heart that she would never truly reach Samuel. After only a few attempts at connection, Destiny discovered something that broke her heart. Samuel was terrified of being touched. If anyone came too close, especially an adult, he would shrink inward, clutching his worn bunny toy so tightly, eyes wide as if bracing for something terrible. He recoiled from hugs, trembled if anyone laid a hand on his shoulder, and even jerked back when Destiny tried to move a book near him. The first time she tried singing him a lullaby, a gentle melody her own mother had sung to soothe her, Samuel stared blankly, then suddenly squeezed his rabbit, face ashen, breathing ragged, and let a single tear slide down his cheek. Destiny fell silent. She understood that Samuel didn't hate her. He was just afraid of anything tied to adults, of the closeness every child deserves yet never experienced. As soon as Matthew heard the faint song drifting from Samuel's room, he appeared, face hardening, as if he just caught a grave mistake. "What are you doing? Nobody needs lullabies here. Don't take the liberty of consoling or changing anything. I only wanted to help Samuel feel more comfortable. Just follow the doctor's orders. Don't bring your own emotions in here." His gaze, cut like a blade, cold and tinged with frustrated anger. For Matthew, control wasn't merely habit. It was his only defense, the armor he'd built around unspoken losses. In his eyes, any small change posed a threat to the fragile world he'd constructed for his son and for himself. From that point on, Destiny's every move was micromanaged. She could read only certain short stories, allow Samuel to play only with toys Matthew had pre-approved, and stay in his room only during strictly set hours. If anyone else entered, she had to leave immediately. Even meal prep was bound by a rigid menu. No creativity allowed, not even a star-shaped apple slice. Yet the worst part wasn't the rules. It was witnessing Matthew terrify Samuel to the point of shaking. One weekend afternoon, Samuel accidentally spilled orange juice on the rug. A tiny mishap, but Matthew stormed in, eyes dark, voice sharp. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful? This room isn't for destroying." The boy panicked, curling in on himself, lips quivering, hands over his head as if bracing for a storm. Destiny rushed forward to shield him, but Matthew's glare stopped her cold. "Step back. We don't need any heroes here." Samuel's soft sobs filled the air, barely a sound, yet choked in his throat. Destiny felt helpless, watching the man who seemed impervious to pain become the very source of the boy's greatest fear. Tears welled in her eyes, but she turned away, biting back the words she knew would change nothing. That night, in her small room at the end of the hallway, Destiny sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She was no longer strong. Tears soaked her pillow as the helplessness, anger, and sorrow of seeing Samuel so terrified twisted in her chest. She wondered if she truly had the strength to see this through. Because it wasn't just Samuel who needed saving, but Matthew, trapped in his own psychological darkness, where control only shattered things further. Then, from the depths of her childhood, "Memory," her father's voice whispered. "Sometimes light comes only when you dare to step through fear. No one can save you but yourself." Destiny wiped her tears and made a silent vow. Tomorrow she would begin again, refusing to give up. Because if no one stayed by Samuel's side, who would lead him out of this darkness? The next morning, Destiny awoke early as always, her eyes still puffy from tears, but her face firm and determined with not a crack in her resolve. She slipped through the silent hallway, rain pattering against the windows. shrouding New York City in a heavy gray haze. Inside the penthouse, every sound seemed muted, and the air thick with nameless weight. But within Destiny burned a small flame, an unspoken stubbornness no hardship or tears could extinguish. She thought of Samuel's ashen face and the way he closed his eyes whenever adults raised their voices. His fear mirrored the child she had once been, the child who waited for someone brave enough to stay and truly care. That morning, after finishing her chores, Destiny entered Samuel's room as usual. He sat by the window, clutching his old bunny, eyes fixed on the rivulets of rain sliding down the glass. In days past, Matthew's constant warnings, controls, and rules had kept her hesitant. But today, beneath the downpour outside, Destiny felt a clarity. If no one dared to break this cycle, Samuel would remain trapped in his icy cage forever. Gently, she pulled a small, bright green hand puppet, a goofy dinosaur she'd saved up to buy at a flea market, out of her coat pocket. Keeping a respectful distance, she spoke softly. "Hey there, anyone up for a dinosaur story today?" Samuel didn't turn around, but Destiny pressed on. She began to tell a tale in a silly voice, making the puppet dance and roar in ridiculous fashion until, with a sudden slip, the dinosaur tripped on a banana peel and fell flat on the rug, flailing its arms as if in pain. Oh no, dinosaur slip. Ouch! She let out a playful whimper. Then had the dinosaur struggled to its feet, grimacing, and shuffled toward the bunny Samuel held. And then it happened, soft as a breeze, through a cracked door as small as a raindrop falling in silence. Samuel let out a tiny laugh, at first barely more than a breath, then a genuine little chuckle. His eyes widened, a faint spark of joy lighting them, though his lips pressed together as if afraid to cross some unseen boundary. Destiny held her breath, daring nothing more than a gentle smile. She kept up the puppet's antics, this time staging a dramatic tumble into the bunny's lap, and they all laughed together. Samuel covered his mouth but couldn't hide the little shakes of his shoulders. Joy, however fleeting, had reached him. In that laugh, Destiny knew she'd cracked the thickest shell around his heart. What Destiny didn't realize was that outside the door in the dim hallway, Matthew Blake had been standing silent for some time. Leaning against the wall, rigid, he peered through the narrow opening. That tiny laugh echoed farther and louder than any sound in the house had in over a year. For the first time in a long time, Matthew felt a wave of confusion, astonishment mingled with doubt, equal parts joy and fear. He dared not step inside, part pride, part disbelief that a mere housekeeper he had always dismissed could touch his son's heart with something so simple. Deep inside, tumultuous questions surged. Had he been wrong all this time? Were his rigid rules and strict control the very barriers driving Samuel further away? Silently, Matthew turned and walked away, carrying those tangled emotions with him. He didn't know whether to feel anger, relief, or shame. His long-hidden weakness and helplessness laid bare by a brief, innocent laugh. But for Destiny, that moment planted a seed of hope. In the penthouse's oppressive gloom, a sliver of light had finally pierced through, fragile yet not easily snuffed out. She didn't expect a miracle, but she knew this. As long as she persevered, as long as there was laughter, there would be a chance to free Samuel from his lonely cage. The days in the penthouse stretched on like frozen moments. Every movement, every breath, every sound seemed to slow under the crushing weight Destiny felt so keenly. The suffocation came not only from the endless chores, but from a growing fear in her heart that she might never truly reach Samuel. After only a few attempts, Destiny discovered something that broke her heart. Samuel was terrified of any touch. If an adult came too close, he would shrink into himself, clutching his ragged bunny so tightly, eyes wide as though waiting for something terrible to happen. He recoiled from hugs, trembled if anyone touched his shoulder, even flinched away when Destiny simply tried to bring a book within reach. The first time she tried singing him a lullaby, a gentle tune her mother used to soothe her, Samuel stared blankly, then suddenly squeezed his rabbit, face drained of color, breath ragged, and a single tear slipped down his cheek. Destiny fell silent. She understood. Samuel didn't hate her. He was terrified of the very closeness every child deserves. The moment Matthew heard her singing drift from Samuel's room, he appeared, face darkening as if she'd committed some grave offense. "What are you doing? No one needs lullabies here. Don't take it upon yourself to comfort him or change anything." "I only wanted to help Samuel feel more at ease." "Just follow the doctor's orders. Don't bring your own feelings into this." His gaze was as sharp as a knife, cold, laced with frustrated anger. For Matthew, control wasn't mere habit. It was the only defense he had, the armor he'd built around unspoken pain. To him, any small change threatened the fragile world he'd crafted for his son and for himself. From then on, Destiny's every move was restricted. She could read only approved short stories, let Samuel play only with toys Matthew pre-screened, and stay in his room strictly during allotted hours. If anyone else entered, she had to leave at once. Even meal times were bound by an unyielding menu. No creativity allowed, not even cutting an apple into a star. But perhaps the cruelest blow wasn't the rules. It was the afternoon she watched Matthew terrify Samuel into shaking. One weekend, Samuel accidentally spilled orange juice on the rug. A tiny mishap, but Matthew stormed in, eyes blazing, voice snapping. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful? This room isn't for making messes." The boy panicked, curling in on himself, lips quivering, hands covering his head as if huddling from a storm. Destiny rushed forward to protect him, but Matthew's glare stopped her cold. "Step back. We don't need any heroes here." Samuel's muffled sobs filled the silent room. Destiny felt helpless watching this man, once seeming invincible, become the source of his son's greatest fear. Tears stung her eyes, but she looked away, biting back the words that would change nothing. That night, in her tiny quarters at the end of the hall, Destiny sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She wasn't strong anymore, her pillow soaked, with tears as anger, helplessness, and grief knotted in her chest. She wondered if she truly had the strength to see this through, because it wasn't just Samuel who needed saving, but Matthew, trapped in his own dark prison, where control only deepened the wounds. Yet from the depths of her memory came her father's voice. "Sometimes light appears only when you dare to step through fear. No one can save you but yourself." Destiny wiped her tears and vowed. Tomorrow she would begin again, refusing to give up, because if no one stayed by Samuel's side, who would lead him out of this darkness? The moment Destiny's door clicked shut. Behind her, tears still wet on her cheeks, the penthouse grew even heavier. A tense silence spread through every room like the onset of the longest night. Destiny felt all her hard-won effort slipping away in an instant. Every fragile hope swept aside by a cold, merciless storm. But in that stillness, Mrs. Lorraine, who had watched silently until now, decided she could stand by no longer. She strode into Matthew's study where he stood alone by the window, shoulders trembling with anger or exhaustion. She couldn't tell. She didn't mince words or offer empty comfort. "Matthew, you think you're protecting Samuel by controlling everything? But you're really punishing yourself and pushing your son further from the love he needs most." Matthew turned, eyes rimmed red, his first true display of confusion and hurt behind that cold facade. "You don't understand. If anything happens to Samuel, if I lose him like I lost Anna, I wouldn't survive." Mrs. Lorraine stepped closer, placing a firm, gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your fear has made you a stranger to your own son. Samuel needs a father who dares to love, not a warden." Sometimes the only way to become stronger is to admit you're weak. Her words cracked the final piece of the wall Matthew had built around himself. He lowered his head, his legs no longer steady. The pride that had shielded him from loss lay shattered. In that vulnerable moment, Matthew saw that he had not only hurt Destiny, the only person brave enough to enter Samuel's world, but had become the source of his own son's fear and loneliness. That night, as Destiny sat motionless in her room, a quiet knock came at her door. Matthew appeared, no longer bearing his usual rigid composure. He entered and stood in silence for a long moment before speaking, not in commands, but in a plea of desperation. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was just so terrified. I didn't know how to save Samuel. I can't bear to lose anyone else. I thought controlling everything would protect him, but instead, I only made things worse. Destiny was stunned. Behind that cold, authoritarian exterior stood a father broken by helplessness and haunted by his own failures. His eyes now held emptiness, powerlessness, and the deepest fear. Silently, Destiny sat beside him, hands clasped together. She told him of her own childhood, of her father's sudden passing, of her mother and brother struggling in their rundown apartment, of nights spent wide awake in pain and fear, knowing that one unforeseen tragedy could cost them everything. I used to believe that if I controlled everything, if I never let myself be weak, I could hold on to what I loved. But I learned that only patience and the courage to share our fears can help us overcome the loss we dread. Destiny's simple, heartfelt words free of blame served as healing for Matthew's long-suppressed wounds. Side by side, two people from opposite worlds found they shared the same pain, the terror of losing family, and the burden of feeling they must face it alone. After that night, a quiet transformation took hold in the penthouse. Matthew began to see Destiny with new eyes. For the first time, he sought her input on Samuel's schedule, listened to her gentle suggestions for meals, routines, and even the light exercises he had once forbidden. The harsh commands and vigilant glares vanished, replaced by cautious but genuine trust. And for the first time, Destiny felt true partnership in the fight to bring Samuel back into the light. Together they sat down and planned the days ahead, the little games, the gentle workouts, new books to read, the bedtime stories to share. These small steps marked the most important beginning of all, the start of a healing journey that no longer required either of them to stand alone. After that night of tears and honesty, a new atmosphere quietly spread through the penthouse. Gone were the weary glances, the dry commands, and the invisible distance dividing the three of them under one roof. In their place came small, simple signs of revival. Most importantly, Matthew's first true initiative. The next morning it was Matthew who brewed the coffee, setting a cup down beside Destiny as an unspoken thank you. He didn't remain holed up in his study as usual. Instead, he approached Samuel and Destiny, asking how Samuel's morning had been, what he liked to eat, what stories he enjoyed. Though awkward at times, his gaze was gentler than Destiny had ever seen. In the days that followed, Destiny no longer tiptoed around every little decision. She organized activities for Samuel with confidence, and to her surprise, Matthew joined in, once assembling Lego with her and his son on the living room floor. Another time, fumbling to chop vegetables in the kitchen, then blushing with laughter when Destiny teased him about cutting carrots into giant slices. One afternoon, under soft sunlight, Matthew carried Samuel out onto the balcony. The three of them sat on the lounge bench, pointing out sparrows hopping on the railing, naming the passing clouds, telling stories about the bright red bus rumbling by on the street below. For the first time in months, the house rang with gentle laughter and the everyday chatter only a real family shares. Back at the penthouse, the once cold, heavy atmosphere now overflowed with laughter, warmth, color, and the simple sounds of a real home. Mornings found Samuel racing around the living room, his little feet clicking on the hardwood, then scrambling onto a chair to demand that Destiny read him a story, that Matthew draw a superhero, or that Mrs. Lorraine water the balcony plants. The walls of control had fallen. In their place were framed drawings, taped-up artwork everywhere, and soft music playing every evening as the family dined together. Matthew, once a man hidden behind a hard, emotionless shell, now paused to listen, to hug his son, and to share every small worry or joy with Destiny. He began planning family picnics, preparing weekend breakfasts with his own hands, even baking cookies, albeit messily, to Destiny's teasing laughter as flour scattered across the floor. The closer they grew, the more Matthew realized that happiness isn't about control or avoiding pain, but about opening your heart, facing it, and forgiving yourself and your loved ones. He was grateful to Destiny, not only for saving Samuel from the brink, but for teaching him again what hope, forgiveness, and new beginnings really mean. One spring afternoon, when lavender blooms filled the market stalls, Matthew led Destiny and Samuel to a small white house in the northern suburbs. It had a welcoming porch, fields of pale purple flowers, and a broad yard where Samuel could run freely under the sun. After a simple picnic among the blooms, Matthew knelt, took out a small ring, and looked into Destiny's eyes, bright with joy and misty with tears. "You brought light back into this family, taught me what love, courage, and faith truly are. Destiny, will you marry me? Be Samuel's mother and be our home." Words failed Destiny as tears streamed down her face. She nodded. Then the three of them embraced, their simple, profound happiness bursting into the warm spring air. From that day on, the little house by the lavender fields became Samuel's haven of love and growth, and the place where Matthew and Destiny healed old wounds together as they built a new future. Cozy dinners, laughter-filled mornings, family vacations, all stood as proof of the enduring power of love, the unquenchable flame of hope, and the truth that no matter how thick the darkness, a single spark and an outstretched hand can lead us back into the light. Destiny, Matthew, and Samuel's story ends in a perfect, happily ever after. But it's also a reminder of the power of hope, perseverance, and forgiveness. Sometimes miracles don't come from grand gestures, but from a child's laugh, a timely helping hand, or the courage to change. What do you think is the most important ingredient for a wounded family to truly heal and find happiness again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe so you won't miss our next touching tale. Thank you for being with us and listening. Back at the penthouse, the once cold, heavy atmosphere now overflowed with laughter, warmth, color, and the simple sounds of a real home. Mornings found Samuel racing around the living room, his little feet clicking on the hardwood, then scrambling onto a chair to demand that Destiny read him a story, that Matthew draw a superhero, or that Mrs. Lorraine water the balcony plants. The walls of control had fallen. In their place were framed drawings, taped-up artwork everywhere, and soft music playing every evening as the family dined together. Matthew, once a man hidden behind a hard, emotionless shell, now paused to listen, to hug his son, and to share every small worry or joy with Destiny. He began planning family picnics, preparing weekend breakfasts with his own hands, even baking cookies, albeit messily, to Destiny's teasing laughter as flour scattered across the floor. The closer they grew, the more Matthew realized that happiness isn't about control or avoiding pain, but about opening your heart, facing it, and forgiving yourself and your loved ones. He was grateful to Destiny, not only for saving Samuel from the brink, but for teaching him again what hope, forgiveness, and new beginnings really mean. One spring afternoon, when lavender blooms filled the market stalls, Matthew led Destiny and Samuel to a small white house in the northern suburbs. It had a welcoming porch, fields of pale purple flowers, and a broad yard where Samuel could run freely under the sun. After a simple picnic among the blooms, Matthew knelt, took out a small ring, and looked into Destiny's eyes, bright with joy and misty with tears. "You brought light back into this family, taught me what love, courage, and faith truly are. Destiny, will you marry me? Be Samuel's mother and be our home." Words failed Destiny as tears streamed down her face. She nodded. Then the three of them embraced, their simple, profound happiness bursting into the warm spring air. From that day on, the little house by the lavender fields became Samuel's haven of love and growth, and the place where Matthew and Destiny healed old wounds together as they built a new future. Cozy dinners, laughter-filled mornings, family vacations, all stood as proof of the enduring power of love, the unquenchable flame of hope, and the truth that no matter how thick the darkness, a single spark and an outstretched hand can lead us back into the light. Destiny, Matthew, and Samuel's story ends in a perfect, happily ever after. But it's also a reminder of the power of hope, perseverance, and forgiveness. Sometimes miracles don't come from grand gestures, but from a child's laugh, a timely helping hand, or the courage to change. What do you think is the most important ingredient for a wounded family to truly heal and find happiness again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe so you won't miss our next touching tale. Thank you for being with us and listening.